Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast where we talk about what it's like to be healthy and stay healthy in a modern, fast-paced world. I am your host, Tiffany Simms, and today I am bringing you Miss Mallorie Rodgers. And if you are a woman who has been feeling like she's stuck, almost like she's been trapped in a corner and she doesn't have any options because like she built this whole society and walls around her where the only option is to keep pushing forward and suck it up, today's episode is gonna be for you. So, Mallorie, thank you for being on this show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, can you share with our listeners, our besties, if you will, like a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I live in Texas and I'm a therapist, but I am most passionate in both therapy world and also my personal world of making the world a better place, a more fulfilling place, an enjoyable place for neurodivergent people to live their lives and to enjoy their lives.
I love that. As you could tell from behind, maybe you couldn't tell, but like I am definitely neurodivergent and squirrel moments and the way my brain works and attention and all the shiny objects. And so, like, I absolutely love that. And also, caveat, I think that neurodivergence is actually the normal and
hmm
that like fitting in the box is the abnormal because everyone has something, like, we all function differently. So
hmm
like
Yeah, I don't
how is there normal when we all are so individualized?
I know, like the current stat that they'll tell you, will tell you is that it's 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent. And I'm like, I just don't believe that. What I think is a lot of people just been masking for a really long time because yeah, when you look around and the more I talk to people, it's hard to find people who either, do identify as neurotypical or don't have someone close in their lives, multiple people. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Question for you
mm,
on the topic of masking. Do you think that masking is a bad thing?
mm-mm. Nope. It's a quick answer because it's a really clear one for me. I think it has fallout, like it has consequences, which we have to tend to, but I think it's protective.
Mm.
Um, I wish it wasn't necessary, but it really can be, and so it is. It's a protective strategy, in my opinion. Yeah.
When you first said that, and I didn't know I felt this way until this exact moment, which is like, I think that, like, I feel like we live in a world right now where, like, if anyone has to mask, it means the world isn't protecting them and they're not being welcoming of them and accepting of them and like flexible to their differences. And I think that I agreed with, like, I believe that I subscribed to that for a period of time. And in this moment, it's called adaptability and it's called flexibility and called like understanding and reading a room and knowing where you're going. And so, like, I think everyone, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical or anywhere in between, like, everyone has moments of showing up their best self in that scenario. And so, why did it become such a bad thing where everyone had to always accommodate our differences rather than us learning how to use the tools we have in our toolbox to make this the best opportunity for us? I feel like that's a bold statement I just made.
I think it is. I think some people would probably disagree with it, but I mean, I think ideally the world would be always, feel safe and accepting for everyone. But that's really that's impossible to do, right? That like everyone's needs at the same time could be met. And so safe, yes, but needs being met, probably not. Like at some point, we're all having to take turns. Um, oh shoot, and there was something else you said. I was gonna comment on.
I mean, the
Um,
world should be kind to you, yes. Are there
mm,
certain things
mhm,
if you need certain accommodations? 100%, yes. But I think now that I'm thinking about this, I think it's a disservice if we make everyone bend to us because now we're not growing in
right.
our own abilities to be able to like thrive in every environment that we're boxing ourselves in.
Mhm. I think one of the bad raps that the word accommodation can get sometimes, I see this in the educational space, I see it, personal life, but like that it means you're taking away all element of challenge
Mm.
for a person. And it's like, no, that's not at all the point. But when we look at a system, I think a lot about like the education system, just with what I do. It's not set up for someone who has different needs than like the neurotypical one track mind kind of brain. Not really. We've made some space for gifted kiddos. We've made some space for, there's like a whole separate thing for special education and stuff like that. But anyway, that's not what an accommodation is. It's to say, here, you need a different type of support so that you can also meet your best, and that can be okay.
Now, do
I
you
remember
think that oh, sorry, go ahead.
I remembered what I was gonna say, which was earlier, which was, yes, the idea of masking, especially when I bring it up to like a client or when I was going through my own trying to figure out what I was doing to mask thing, is that it comes with the moment you figure out what you're masking and how you're doing it, that means that now you have to figure out how to unmask. And I don't think that it's not this then that necessarily.
Mm, that's brilliant. That's such a great that's like it's one of those little like brain what's the word I want? Brain candy where you just kind of like savor on it for a minute and like chew and digest it and like work that and noodle it through to figure out where you land on that conversation.
Mm.
Do you think and then we're gonna hop into I want to go down this rabbit hole real quick before we hop back into like getting yourself boxed into something. Do you think that a lot of the needs of people could be met if humans in general just happen to be curious and accepting of people? Do you know
Yeah,
what I
I think if it
mean?
well, I think what I'm hearing is if different didn't have to mean bad when more people's needs get met.
Yeah.
And I say yes.
Like
We
I feel like
interpret
it would be
different to be
solved
wrong.
if we all took the viewpoint of just welcoming and seeing and meeting people as their individual selves and adjusting in each of those situations, I feel like we wouldn't need all of the different layers and barriers because every human would just be supportive in the best way they could to
Mhm,
another human sharing the same space as them. And maybe that's
mhm.
just me like being naive.
I think it's so ideal, and I think it's beautiful. There's a lot of things that stand in the way, and sometimes it's personal stuff, but I also think sometimes it's systemic stuff that, like, if we got
Mhm.
rid of some of this other stuff, right, and we could just be humans on these different systemic levels, um, it would make a huge change.
Mm. Well, that's some food for our besties to think about too. Like, where do you sit in that conversation? Because whether you're neurodivergent, neurotypical, what have you, like, there's certain things that if they were set up differently would be more ideal for you. And, like, how are you setting that up for other people? I really encourage you, if you're listening, to just kind of like toy with that idea for a little bit. Not judge yourself for some of the thoughts you might have or try to force it one way or the other but really just like explore where you land in that conversation and how you want to contribute to the success of everyone around you winning, no matter where they come from and what their needs are. But Mallory, you know, you were staring with me behind the scenes in the green room, like feeling like you had gotten to a point where you felt boxed in your life, in your job, in all of the things, and that you didn't really have any options. And so, can you talk a little bit about what that was like and how you maybe got there so that our listener can kind of like see where we're starting this conversation?
Yeah. Could be as long of a story as I wanted to make it, but, the short version would be that I'm married, I've got a kiddo, my, husband was going through a big, career change, which is a really good move for him, but in that, I had a nice job that was, salaried, like I said, I'm a therapist, I was at a group practice, and it was a good gig, and I wanted to hold on to it, right? Because he's making a career change, and so, like, this is what I need to do, and so here comes that feeling of stuckness because I could tell just in myself, to a small degree at the time, something was off, this doesn't feel right. I think now I look back, doing a lot of masking, having to just kinda get through it and do it, and feeling like, "Oh, I can't make this jump that I've imagined doing," which was running my own business, going off on my own, like, I'll do that later, right? When things are more stable, when everything's not riding on me, I can go and I can do that. Um, but then to get to this point where it was just a breaking point. It was very clear to me, it's very clear to my husband. He's like, he was asking for months to just go and like make this step for myself. And I was like, no, 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 like I need to do this timeline, it's in my mind,
I need to be
which
the
is
stability in our life right now.
yeah. And he's like, what is this timeline you've built? Like everything's fine. It's not like he didn't have a job. It just wasn't the one he imagined. He's like, what are you talking about? And and
Such
then
a relatable thing for men. How many times do we make timelines in our head for how a day will go, but we didn't actually share it with anyone and it wasn't actually ever real, but we had already
Mhm.
mapped out like what time we needed to be showered and out the door and where we were going and blah blah blah. And then they're like sitting there dragging their feet and we're like mad because it's like, don't you know we needed to leave 10 minutes ago?
yeah. And it's like we're going to do something fun. It's not like there's an actual like deadline. Um, and so in this case, he's like, there's not some specific thing. Like we're just living our lives and you built this up and what if you didn't? And when he was asking me like, what's standing in the way here? Like, why haven't you? Why won't you? Um, and I just was like, I don't know. And that's where it came back to, oh, like,
Mm.
I don't know that I believe in myself. Like, I don't know. I think I just have experienced myself as being stuck here. And so, it really shook some things loose, even reflecting on like, okay, I think even whenever I mean, I absolutely love what I do. Very passionate about it, very much in love with it. But back when I chose it, part of the reason I chose to even be a therapist or a counselor in the first place was because I was like, when I was going into college, I was like, I could do that. Like, I can see right now that I can talk to people. I can do that. And I would probably would have chosen this career, but I also look back and wonder what would have been different if I would have known then, like, well, don't just pick something you think you could do now, basically. Like, what you could do so many things. That belief in myself, if that had been different, I do wonder just like what what would have been different.
My my little squirrel brain probably just chomped on like the non-important part of this, but it anyway, which was where did this belief system of what you picked when you were an 18-year-old child becoming adult all of a sudden pigeonhole you into your whole life? Like, when did that become, why is that a thing? When did it
Mhm,
become the pressure of like, you have to know what you're going to do the rest of your life?
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
makes no
It's wild
sense
to
to
me.
me.
Mm-mm.
I
It's
coach high
wild.
school field hockey. And so all of these girls, like, they're worried as they should be worried about academics. They should be striving to be the best versions of themselves, whatever that looks like for them. But I tell them when they're like, get all caught up about this whole, I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I don't know what I want to be. And I was like, what if you trusted that whatever you picked right now was exactly what you needed to learn? And that if something else you were supposed to do will unfold itself down the road, but that you didn't wait. Well, what if I wasted all my time and all my parents' money and like all this stuff? And it's like,
Mm.
but what if you needed to learn all the skills in that adventure in order to set yourself up for the thing? And had you not gone on that adventure, this wouldn't, the thing that you were supposed to be doing next would have never been a possibility.
And I'm so curious if this is because I don't believe it's just a woman thing. I talk to men who have the same thing, but I'm curious if it's more likely. I mean, did you feel like you had that freedom? Did you feel that freedom for yourself to believe you could do so many things?
When I look back, no, and that conversation, I don't believe my mom believed that to be true. My parents didn't believe that to be true, right? Like, I believe that we're the first generation to truly have, like, our parents had the opportunity and possibility. Well, not even really, because most of them weren't born, like, we were born right at the cusp of bank accounts and being able to be business owners and like all of those things that we think are just common, like, duh, we're a human, of course you can have a bank account. And so
Mhm,
like they were born into a time where like that wasn't always possibility. And so they were the first ones to have some opportunities gifted. And so when you picked, you were there for the long haul because there weren't as many opportunities. Where now, when I think about it, like we're the first to have all the opportunities and possibilities. Also the first to understand the risk of going after success the wrong way and what that looks like. And so I think we are the first ones to recognize really that what I chose once doesn't mean that it has to be the forever. it just is the stepping stone to collect more skills and knowledge to determine what the next chapter after that could be. And so I just don't think that it existed yet. I think it existed as we grew into the like as the years went by.
Mhm.
What do you think about that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree because one, it's a huge privilege, right, to even get to like talk about how like I don't have to be stuck because I could have stayed there. I could have stayed in any number of things, right? And my husband didn't have to change careers. He could have kept doing what he was doing, right? But that there's privilege in it. I'm so grateful for that privilege and also the freedom to even like, the hustle culture idea. Like I don't really want to hustle my life away. I ultimately made this shift so I could enjoy my life more, but that there's hustle involved in that,
hustle's not, I
for
don't think,
sure.
do you think hustle's a bad word?
I think in some I think it's gotten mixed. I would say that the connotation it has now to me seems like work your life away, and
Mm,
I don't want to do that. Um, but work really hard so that when you're not working, you don't have to work, then that's good with me. That's what I
yeah.
want. What about you? What do you think?
I think I went through a season where like hustle was like like it was bad. And now I think I'm to a point where I recognize that there are, whenever you're chasing something new and achieving things you've never achieved before, there are seasons and pockets of hustle, but
Mhm,
they're not like that endless grind if you know why you're doing it. I think when I
mhm,
think about like the traditional sense of hustle, it's just like busy. You're only busy if it's not aligned with something in your core, because now you're just on a hamster wheel for no reason, flopping around. And so I think like that concept, like the association with hustle is like that grind and that drive in those 20-hour days when it was never aligned with where you were going to begin with. Whereas now I see that like hustle, like there are seasons. I'm a business owner. There are seasons of hustle, but it's just that it's a season and it has a very defined purpose and it doesn't feel heavy because the work that I need to do and accomplish is very tangible to the results that I'm driving for. And then there's always like an end date. Like I'm pushing for a launch. I'm pushing for a thing. And then there's moment of pause and regrouping and enjoying the fruits of my labor before I get that new idea and that next like drive.
mhm. I hear intentionality, and I guess I hear boundaries around it. Not letting
Hmm.
ourselves just hustle forever or hustle without anything. I think also about like not just hustling as a distraction. Like I don't want to pay attention to all of the like things I'm avoiding. So I'm just
Ding,
gonna
ding, ding,
hustle.
ding, ding.
Yeah.
How many of us lean into work because we're avoiding uncomfortable conversations and stuff at home? It's like, oh, I
Mhm.
gotta work. And I don't know that we're doing it on purpose, but I think it's a
No.
really easy scapegoat to not
Yeah.
be present
And,
at home.
mhm. And like guilty too. I mean, all the time. Not all the time, but if it's not intentional, I think it would be all the time.
Yeah. The intention piece is, I think, what's different about the culture I came from versus where I'm at now. I didn't know
Mhm.
what intention meant. I was just like, I threw myself into it and I was chasing a definition of success that was never mine, 1,000,000% required of me. Like I needed to go through those things to learn what I learned and learn the skills that I developed in those seasons. And now it's like, okay, I have the tools in my toolbox. How do I rearrange myself to make this work for me where I don't resent my life and my day to
Mhm.
days and the people around me and my family and my coworkers? Because it's so easy to resent and live in your misery and you don't even know you're wearing it as like a badge of honor in a comfy blanket, but that's exactly what's happening.
I think I had to also, I'm like thinking through it, reorient when I became self-employed this year and started my own, practice and all of this because I now, like, no one else was really telling me how to spend my time. I was deciding how to spend my time. But that means I need to put boundaries around things for myself. I need to figure out, like, okay, I am gonna have to hustle. I want to build a business here, but what do my boundaries look like? And that's really exciting. It's also very overwhelming, I think. So to have to decide, okay, yeah, I do have this many hours on a Friday where I'm not seeing a single client and it is just business development, marketing, admin day. That could mean 800,000 things, and I could let it just go on forever, but also if I wanted to build in time to, like, go do something enjoyable on a Friday, that's my chance. So that, like, endless hustle that could happen from the time I drop my kid off to the time I pick them up, like, also I could build something in for myself, but no one else is gonna remind me to build it in anymore, it's on me. So I think that intentionality has even looked different for me, being able to just completely, fully direct my time
Yeah.
now.
Something that has helped me in that, so when I worked for someone else, because I think a lot of our listeners, they're traditional employees, they go to work, they clock in, they clock out. They're working through like the messiness of what boundaries look like, and how to do that. And I think one of the biggest gifts that I gave myself was learning how to outwardly coach and actually take responsibility for my root Zoom, um, take responsibility for my calendar. And what that looked like for me was I recognized I'm so proud of her. Like sometimes I look back and with my lens now as a certified high performance coach and the things that I came up with back then, like I'm so proud of her. Um, but it's like, oh, I'm constantly frustrated that my boss doesn't respect my time and that how am I ever supposed to work on this project if they're always coming to me and scheduling a meeting and doing that and like taking the little bit of free time I had, like how rude of them. And I came to this realization like, okay, if I'm frustrated that I don't have time to work on my stuff, well, like, what can I do differently? Well, if my boss is only going by what's on the calendar and he's looking for free spots in my day to have conversations or to see if I'm available to take a meeting, well, I need to take responsibility and put scheduled activities on my calendar for when I want to work on certain things. And so I would like make appointments with myself and I would label what I was working on. And so like then all of a sudden magically my coworkers were like, why are you not getting drive-bys anymore? Like what is happening? Why do you look so peaceful? And it's like because I scheduled in the time. Like I wasn't assuming that they would read my mind and what was on my plate. I made it really, really clear. Or like I
Mhm,
would be like, I would love to work on that if I did get a drive. I would love to work on that for you. Can we go over what I was going to work on today just to make sure I have my priorities right? And then it would be like, oh, well, this isn't important anymore. Sorry, I didn't get back to you. And actually, this needs to move up or this needs to be moved down. And you know what? I need you to actually work on this. I'll take this nugget to someone else. And all of a sudden, like my stress levels significantly reduced.
mhm,
What kind of things, like, worked for like, what did you learn in that process? And also, what's your definition of boundary? Like, how do you talk about boundaries? What do they mean to you?
yeah. Well, to the first one, yes, and I think I got to practice that working for someone else because I primarily worked for someone else. And it we can set the boundaries. We have to learn how to set the boundaries, which we'll talk about what boundary means to me in a second. But also they have to be respected because some people aren't going to respect that. And so I think that's something that needs to be named for people too. It's like that leads me into the definition of boundaries, which is I think it gets this rap that it is something that we are telling other people they have to do. But in reality, it's not. It's telling people what we are and what we aren't going to do, and how we will allow them to treat us and what we are going to do if they do not treat us that way. So a boundary is not saying you can't treat me that way. They can still choose to do that. You can't schedule over this time. They could still try, right? I know plenty of people whose bosses will just schedule right over whatever they had on their calendar or make a different request or change something on the fly. But it is saying, this is what I'm going to do in response to it, right? Like, sometimes that's as extreme as like, I can't be here anymore. But other times it's, we have to have a really serious conversation about my time and how it's being used or the way you're talking to me because I can't, continue to interact with someone who's going to talk to me this way. It's really, activating for me. It's really upsetting. It brings up these things or whatever. So at the end of the day, I think it is telling other people how we are going to respond if they, do certain things or um, step across what we are comfortable with.
I love that you said that because it is like I used to think that boundaries were something for me to enforce, like I was a police officer, and
Mm,
really they're for me to hold.
yeah.
And part of that responsibility is knowing where your boundary is and knowing when you need to remove yourself.
Mhm.
And I think that's the part that is the most crucial, but yet the most overlooked. It's like actually at some point it's no longer my like it's not for me to enforce on you, it's for me to hold. And so that means that if this and you've clearly shown me where you stand in this conversation. And so now it's up to me to remove myself from the situation and whatever that looks like. Doesn't have to be a
Mhm.
fight. It doesn't have to be energetically draining. It's just like this doesn't work for me anymore. Like I wish you well. Um, and when I think about the workplace, sometimes it's that really uncomfortable conversation of we want to word vomit at our bosses and our employers, like they are supposed to listen to us, but we were hired for a job in exchange for a pay. And so like there's an exchange for services and financial income. And so sometimes it's like that uncomfortable conversation of being like I think we have different our priorities are mismatched. Can we come back to the table and really talk about what our priorities as an organization are and how I fit into that? Because I think as
Mhm.
individual contributors, so often we get so wrapped in our bosses don't know. And if we weren't here, the whole thing would crumble and they
Mhm.
have no idea what I get to get my job done. So we're chasing the wrong carrot the whole time. And then we resent that we're not getting the promotions and opportunities and it's like but yet we never took a moment to think, how do I fit into the bigger picture? Right. And so,
Mhm.
like, that's a skill too. And that comes with
Mhm.
like those conversations of like, how does this work? Because I feel like we're constantly butting heads about what's important. So at the end of the day, like, what's the department priority and how do I fit into that? Because I'm tired of being frustrated and I'm sure you're tired of me griping. So, like, what do we
Mhm.
need to do differently? And is it what's that conversation look like? And those are things I just don't think we're taught how to have those kind of conversations.
Mm-mm. Something I was gonna ask you too, thinking about what you were just saying, right? Through the lens of women specifically, because having the power to even bring that conversation up feels new
Mhm.
in a workplace environment, relatively new
Mm.
for women. To say, I have this, XYZ, let's and to not feel like they're coming across as rude or any number of
Needy.
words that we could use. Yeah. Simply for expressing a need and, having something that they need to talk through. It's a confrontation, really. Or at the very least, just seeking clarity, which can oftentimes, I feel like, from women come across as like, oh, well, she's, XYZ, not just, oh, she's asking for these things or she needs to have this conversation. It's this label and she is. So it feels, I guess, in my head, relatively new. What do you think?
I think that I think it's a skill we just hadn't developed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that skill gets developed earlier for males than it does for females. But at the end of the day, it's a skill and it takes practice and it takes like ownership of wanting to get good at that and recognizing that we are responsible for our outcomes, period. And that's a hard pill to swallow too, especially if you weren't raised with that knowingness or if you're constantly like adjusting for everyone else's needs. Um, the other thing, and so I don't know if that answers their question. The other thing that kind of popped up for me while you were sharing was I think for women, because we are so self-sacrificing in that we see opportunity and abundance and we want everyone around us to win, not self-sacrificing as in like I'm a martyr and blah blah blah, but like we want everyone around us to win, so we will do whatever it takes to make sure everyone else is comfortable and thriving. And in that, we have an internal monologue, or this is just my perspective, that we have this internal monologue that if I speak up, I'm disrupting someone else's peace. And so when we do get brave enough to say it, it's because we're already like tapped out and it comes out as emotional vomit rather than, so it comes out emotionally charged rather than conversationally. And I think that that's the difference. I think that that's where we are setting ourselves up for failure is we only go to the table when we're like emotionally done and then it comes out in that tone and in that cadence and in that voice where like how is anyone ever supposed to receive the message we're trying to present? And then we walk away feeling like they think I'm insignificant. They think I'm emotional. I think, well, we did come to the table emotionally. Of course they thought that. Rather than just coming to the table calm and collected and being like, we have a conversation we need to have. You like, but if you come in, you don't listen to me and you don't respect me, and I told you I needed to blah 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 blah. It's like our 12-year-olds coming to us because of whatever we did and they felt unseen. And so
Mhm.
I think that as women, like that is one of those things, that's one of those like moments to just check of like, I don't need to act like a man. I don't need to posture up. But like, am I really coming to the conversation in a way where someone can actually hear what I'm saying? Or am I like shutting the door before I even get started?
Mm.
Those were one of the things that I had to recognize for myself as to why I wasn't being received the way that I wanted to be received. Did I answer your question? I feel like I might have danced around it a
Yeah. No, I think so. Um, yeah, because I hear that it's the I guess for me, I see like the both parts of like women needing to own that like the way we come to the table. Like really what I hear you saying is like earlier on expressing something, right? Not letting it build up to this point where like I'm just completely fed up and now I don't know how to say it without being emotional or being upset or whatever. And then I also see that like at least from where I come from, I think seeing that like women get socialized to do that, get socialized to, be quiet, sit down, whatever, fit in the box. And that box seems to be getting bigger, which I think is really cool. Um, but then you have to know what you want to do with it. I feel like that comes in kind of that with that responsibility, like I was saying earlier, that I felt whenever I started working for myself, but that also is true anywhere else. When you have the space or you start to decide to take up the space, I think it's also a really big thing. Um, how do you want to do it? How do you want to advocate for
Mhm.
yourself? And that's just something like I think we're learning how to teach even little girls, but like teach women how to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like a skill. Yeah, like you said, it's a skill, I think.
I'm really excited for not the next generation, but the generation after that. Because like
Mm,
pendulums swing, like when there's something that needs to be fixed, our pendulums swing all the way to the one side where it's like we can't live there, like it's not productive for anyone. And then like
mhm,
we find the middle ground after we've learned and healed and figured and massaged it out. And so it takes a few iterations of like
mhm,
trying to fix, and then we over course correct, and then someone broke. So anyway, I'm excited for like the next two generations to see where that conversation lands. And it's not to say that every time you come to the table, like centered and grounded and calm in your knowing that it's received well. Like I've been in boardrooms with people who, where it's like, actually, can you send me the meeting invite? I need to be involved in that meeting. And I've been told by a VP, or the plant manager once that he was like, well, I didn't invite you because you'll get emotional. No, and
mm,
I remember in that meeting being like and remember my response, and it wasn't aggressive and it wasn't anything. It was just calmly. I was like, the only reason you didn't invite me is because you know that what I have to say is correct and you don't want to be challenged.
mhm,
And I let it land. And I remember sitting there like, oh my God, Tiffany, you've done it now. Like this was the final straw. You're getting fired. And
mhm,
leaving that room, and then other managers of other departments, and here I am, an individual contributor at the time, saying the thing that the people who are supposed to be protecting me were not comfortable enough saying because they were self-preserving themselves, trying not to
mhm,
have closed door conversations and reamings, being like, way to speak up for yourself today. You were 100% right. And I remember now, like I remember that moment being like, please don't reassure that I was correct for speaking like that. But when I look back, I was like, you know what? Like, do you know what they were really saying? Was way to say the thing that I was supposed to say for you in a way that could land and be received in the room. Like, way to
mhm,
go, kid. Right. And I'm all worried that, like, please don't encourage that version of me to like ruffle feathers. But when I look back, it's like it was the way it was presented. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't like, oh my God, like don't call me a little girl. And like there was none of that. It was just kind of like, you just don't want me to challenge you. Call it what it is.
mhm.
And so I think that those are just skills that we just get to learn over time as we say, this isn't working for me. The way I'm
Mhm.
doing it isn't working for me. So what can I do differently that doesn't blow up my whole life?
Yep, and it reminds me too of what we were saying earlier about just, like, belief in yourself, or belief in
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, because that's a shift I hear happening for you too, of, like, back then thinking, "Oh, it was like, oh, like, I just don't encourage that, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't talk like that," and I almost feel like the confidence of yourself of, like, going there like, "Well, I can actually, no, 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 like, it's okay to say the thing that needs to be said. I wasn't wrong." Maybe there's a different way to say it, but that someone else said it, but if it's not being said, I believe in saying it, and, like, that could be a core value, and that's worth leaning into, in my opinion, so, yeah. Mhm.
1,000,000%. Like, for our bestie listening, I really hope that like hearing Mallory and I talk about our different stories and perspective is really giving you an opportunity to kind of put yourself in the story. What experience have you had? What is happening right now in your life that isn't working for you? What approach might you be able to try differently? Almost like being the scientist of your own life and you trial and error new things. Because I don't think that there's just a stamp or a button. Right? Like, it is that trial and error to figuring out, like, our own voice and what works for us and what works for our family. So, Mallory, like, as we are wrapping up this episode, is there anything that, like, you really wanted to touch on that we didn't get to? Or any final words that you'd like to share with our bestie listening?
I think we about covered it, but the thing I've taken away just from, we're recording this at the almost the end of December, and the thing I've taken away for myself from this year, and would love for anyone else to hear too, is that if there's a thing that you've imagined for yourself when you really let yourself dream, but then you pull it back really quickly because you think you couldn't do it, or you're not capable, or there aren't the resources, to experiment with giving yourself the space to wonder, what if? If I just let myself dream a little bit, if I just let myself open those doors, I can always close them again. But what could happen? And what would those next couple of steps be? And can I take those now? And for me, it was, starting my own business and doing a really big shift, but it could be something as small as how you run a Tuesday in your house, or, where you like to go out to eat. And it can go really far. So, yeah, believing in yourself and giving yourself the space to be curious, if you really are stuck, or if it just feels that way.
I love that. I have a follow-up question.
Mm.
Did you ever have that moment? Like, did you think, like, what's my worst case scenario and then realize you were living it anyway?
I haven't lived my worst case scenario for sure, but I've lived some of the harder moments,
Mm.
and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we got through it.
Right. It's like, so why not try? Like, what's the worst
Right.
that's gonna happen? Okay.
Hmm.
Is
Yep.
that
We'll
better or
figure it
worse than
out.
what's happening now? It's probably the same.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh my god, I
And
love
it
that so
was,
much.
yeah, it could be so much worse. So yeah, it's really encouraging too to live that and then be like, okay, as a naturally anxious person, I can recognize that my anxiety was way higher and before the thing happened than it was after.
Oh my god, is that not the truest statement ever stated?
Hmm. Hmm.
My anxiety was higher before it happened than it was after I took the leap.
Hmm.
That is gold. If you are listening, I want you to write it down. Like, what you're experiencing in this moment is so much more scary and anxiety ridden than anything that's going to happen on the other side of the choice that you're trying to make. Oh, so good. Mallory, how do people connect with you outside of the show?
Best way would either be on Instagram or my website. So, website and Instagram are my first and last name. So, Mallorie, and then Rogers with a D in it.
Cool. And I will be
Rogers.
dropping those in the show notes. With that, Mallory, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experiences with us. With that, that's Two Humans Talking. I'll see you next time. Bye.